things that I like to do with this tube system, and I'm actually going to put a tube together for you now, is to balance where I put the weight within the tube. So if I'm fishing a slow pull, I want to put most of the weight at the front end of the fly so that it swims down and holds a nice keel, and the fur and the feather actually hold really well behind the tube. If I'm fishing very fast water, then I might put some weight further back in the tube to help get that tube down and get it to the level in the water where I think the salmon might be. Now we can do the next stage with a lighter, but I've got a cauterizer here on the bench, so I'm going to use a cauterizer because it's just a little bit easier for me to burr the ends of the tubes and get them to do what I want to. So taking the inner tube, I'm just going to very, very slightly burr over the end. And I don't want much of a burr, all I want is a little tiny lip on the edge of that tube. Now when I push that in, it's a little bit more difficult to get into the outer sleeve, but it's actually gripping a little bit. I could add some glue to that, but personally I like to do it with thread anyway. When we put the metal sleeves on, then you might want to think about possibly putting a little bit of glue on it, or if we were just going to use the coloured bodies, then we might glue that piece on, because our hook is going to be sat in here. So I'll now trim that off, and I'm trimming that tube to give me just enough room to take the eye of the hook and a little bit of the shaft. So we've cut that off there. And if you want to, if you're old school tube fly man and you like to see that burred over a little bit, then burr it over. But really, it's fine as it is. It's not going to split. This is actually good tubing. The reason we used to burr them in the old days, when we were using biro innards and things for our tube flies, if we didn't burr it over as the hook went in, the tube would split. So there's our next stage. I had a yellow one on there just now, but let's slide this orange tube down, and then to finish this tube off, and I want a little area where I'm going to tie my wing and hackles and such like. I could just tie on the inner tube, and that would be successful, but obviously the lip here is going to kick the wing high. So what I'm going to do is cut another little piece of my outer tube, not a big piece, maybe a quarter of an inch, but it depends on where we're looking to put that weight and how big a fly we're tying. I'm going to cut off a piece of that tube, and I'm now going to slide that right the way down, and that's now butted up, so I'm almost where I want to be. And what I've done here, I've got the weight right in the middle of what's going to be my tube, hooking this end, and then I'll be tying off here. If I wanted the weight further forward, then obviously I could have the back length of tube longer and the front piece shorter, or if I wanted a smaller tube, I could quite easily take that piece off. We'll trim it down. I tend to be a little bit wasteful. I would probably have thrown the little piece I cut off in the bin, but leave it on the bench. You might want to do another fly exactly the same. And you can see now that by shortening that, what I've done, I've shortened the whole tube, but I've brought the weight further forward. Cut off the inner, and then I'm going to go back to the cauterizing tool, but again you could use a lighter, and I'm just going to hold in the cauterizing tool so I don't actually touch the end of the plastic. I'm just going to very, very gently heat the end of it, and this is going to do two things. It's going to burr the end of my tube over, which means when I come to tie, I've got a finishing spot for the thread, and it's also going to melt the two tubes together. That's burred over quite nicely. It's still hot, so I'm just going to take a dubbing needle now, and I'm just going to push a dubbing needle into the end and just leave it there for a second. That's made sure that I've actually got the hole into the end of the tube. I don't want to be stood in the middle of the river trying to put this tube onto the line and not being able to thread the line down through it. and it's also made sure that the two are well and truly welded together at the end, so that I'm not going to get that little inner piece coming off while I'm tying it. So there we are, we've got our tube, we've got a red inner. Obviously you can use whatever inner colour you want. I've used the red just so that you can see what we're doing. We've got a nice weighted orange section in the middle, and we've got this piece of plastic at the end, and having a little piece of plastic tube at the end means that the tie-in is going to be very, very easy.